And so the beginning of our practice is just establishing our posture, sitting in a way that you can be comfortable and relaxed while maintaining clarity and alertness. And settling in, you can gently close your eyes or simply lower your gaze so that your attention begins to be drawn inward. And a helpful starting point is just awareness of the body. So feeling your body sitting, kind of feeling the posture and how you're holding your body. Relaxing the jaw, releasing the shoulders, softening the belly, and any areas or points of tension in the body, just seeing if you can relax and release. Even this simple starting instruction for meditation can take a little time to get used to. We don't generally spend a lot of time just feeling the sensations in our body. But this is a valuable practice, first, simply for awareness, just the mindfulness and present moment awareness that comes with feeling sensations. It's also a useful practice to take into our daily lives so that we can notice when there's stress in the body and different moods and tensions create toxic feelings in the body. So we learn through our meditation practice to release those kinds of tensions, just breathing and relaxing. Oftentimes just noticing how the body tightens is enough to trigger letting go. To, we very naturally let go. And with time, as we work with this kind of release, there's a deeper settling, a deeper sense of peace that comes as we really arrive in our bodies, we arrive in the present moment. We can also notice any sounds in our environment, In an in-person class, we're all sharing, hearing the same sounds. Now we're each in our own environment. So just noticing that. And then noticing how you're feeling right now, what your mood is. What are you carrying with you from this day? What's arising in this moment? And finally, arriving at the breath, feeling the body breathing, the sensations of breathing. Again, a very simple experience that we ordinarily ignore, don't pay attention to, but awareness of breath again brings us into the present moment. It also has a inherently relaxing effect. Might not feel that right away, but just to stay with it, even as the mind wanders or thoughts intervene, just coming back to the breath as best you can. It's quite common for the mind to wander as we try to pay attention to the breath. And at first, it can seem like we're not meditating at all, that we're just ruminating. So we have to bring just a certain level of determination. It's not a grasping, it's not aggressive. It's just a willingness to keep coming back to the breath every time we realize that we're lost in thoughts. we try to bring a kind of gentleness or kindness into our attitude as we practice. It's easy to turn the effort of meditation into a kind of challenge or competition where we're judging ourselves. And that really loses the spirit of practice. Now see if you can find that gentleness within yourself. Just feeling your breath, seeing how your mind perhaps is unruly, pulling you away. And each time, gently bringing the attention back. All right. Nice to have some time to just sit together. I'm just scrolling through to see who's here. Hello, all. Friends from near and far. Mm, yeah. Um, oh, so before I get started, I wanted to mention there's this really kind of cool podcast that's done by Colorado Public Radio that I was on. It's called Back from Broken, and they said it just went live yesterday. Oh no, today. Huh. And I'm gonna sort of see if I can capture the. They have links to the different ways you can listen to it. You know, it's interesting. Podcasts aren't really like websites, so wow, that's confusing. But in case you're interested, it's actually the most extensive story of my life I've ever told. On in an interview, that's kind of their format is they kind of go through your life, and it was like they did a lot of research and they did a lot of conversations with me, and it was like, what was the name of that psychiatrist you had when you were 14? I was like, what? Wait. So it's kind of freaky. It's a little bit like this is your life, you know. Um, but if you're interested, it's nicely done. The guy who does it, the whose podcast it is, he's sober, obviously, and he has his own story, which is quite interesting. But he's a journalist who kind of went through a lot of stuff and came back and back from broken. I also on this coming Monday I'll be interviewed for uh, 10% happier about living kindness. So I will, as soon as they tell me when that's going to be out, I will let you know. Otherwise, I'm really not doing a lot of teaching other than this. Um, Starting to think about, it looks like Vajrapani Institute, where I usually teach a fall retreat, is not going to be ready to open in the fall. So I think we will probably do another virtual retreat in October. So I'll have to start gathering the gang together to talk about that. There is a good possibility I will be teaching live at Southern Dharma, which is the Labor Day week of Labor Day. The retreat usually ends on Labor Day, so that would be fun. Okay, there's that. Um, so step 9, um, and one of the things that just struck me about uh, I did not write a lot about steps 8 and step 9, and when I look at what I did write, I understand why I didn't write very much because I kind of got into my own story maybe a little too much, and it would have been good if I stepped out and did some other things, but because I never wrote about the promises, and but I did in the uh, daily reflections. I went through the promises. I think like um, like pretty extensively. Yeah, like I did whole days on different promises. Uh, I could have a day on a new freedom, and a day on a new happiness, and a day on not regret the past, and a day on knowing peace, and a day on experience can benefit others, and on and on. So if you're interested in my take on the promises, that's there. And I'm thinking that maybe before we move on from step 9, I'll kind of go through that. I'll use that book to talk about because it seems like a huge omission from One Breath at a Time. Um, anyway, who knows? Writing books is a strange thing. Uh, so um, I'm going to read a little bit of the opening. um, of step nine in one breath at a time. So let me read step nine as well, which and by the way, there was a a typo, not exactly a typo. I think wrote it wrong. So in the book, it says, made direct amends to such people whenever possible. But as we all know, it's wherever possible. So I tried to correct that, but they never fixed it. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And when it says to such people, it is referring back to step 8, where it says we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And so the next step is that we made amends to those people. It's obviously interesting and I think important that they separate those two things. I've talked about that, the idea of the willingness having to come before we do this. Um, may direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So the caveat is a really important one, and really winds up eliminating a lot of amends, but not the which is why we need step 8 to really sort of be entirely ready, so that even if we don't make a direct amends to someone we've harmed, we're not holding something back. We're not avoiding it. It's just that we realize, oh, that's going to actually be more harmful if I call that person up and they're like, I told you I never wanted to talk to you again in my life. So, but I'm calling to make amends. Well, you just made it worse. So, the dreaded step 9. What person, when working through the steps, has not looked ahead and feared facing the amends process? Here culminates one of the central themes of the steps, admitting our failings and beginning to take responsibility for them. As this process unfolds, beginning with step 1 and deepening throughout the inventory, something happens to us, a gradual but radical shift from shame, guilt, and denial to openness, acceptance, and honesty. Revealing to ourselves and others through the steps revealing ourselves to ourselves. I'm sorry, try to read. Revealing ourselves to ourselves and others through the steps frees us from having to protect or hide parts of ourselves from the world. Once we discover the lightness of opening in this way, we can become almost playful about our failings. I circled the word playful and put a big question mark there. Like, really? Are you sure about that? So I think there's enough in this paragraph maybe to talk about for the whole evening. But um, yeah, first of all, just that acknowledgement that, anybody who's kind of gone into their first meeting and seen the steps on the wall and read through them had to start kind of getting like, wait, what? You step forward, like made a searching and fearless moral inventory, and then 5, I told it to somebody, and then I made amends to people. It's pretty scary to look ahead to that. And certainly for me, and I think for most people, we need someone to guide us through this process. It's probably not a good idea to do this alone. I would say it's not a good idea. I'm sure there are people who have done it alone and that it was okay, but generally speaking, you know, there are also people who take heroin and they don't get addicted, but it's still just not a good idea. That's all I'm saying. So, here culminates one of the central themes of the steps, admitting our failings and beginning to take responsibility for them. And which is not only one of the central themes of the steps, but probably one of the things that makes makes us again not really be afraid to do the steps and to be intimidated by the steps. And I think that it's one of the reasons why people find excuses. Oh, 12 steps, I don't believe in God, I can't do that, or whatever their reason. I'm not powerless, or whatever the stories that people make. I mean, I understand for some people the steps just are not really the way, but it's I think not uncommon that they're just looking for a reason to not do them, and one of them is that the really kind of radical responsibility that the steps, really put on us. As this process unfolds, beginning with step 1. So that's just, I think it is really important to recognize that in step 1, we're really there's a lot of the steps are actually contained in step 1. When we admitted we were powerless and our lives had become unmanageable, that's it's an inventory, and it it implies steps 2 and step 3, which are the ones that say we need God, because it's saying we're powerless. It, it makes the next steps absolutely necessary. The steps about turning our will and our lives over, but it also is already not just taking inventory, but starting the recovery process and the healing process, and even in a sense the amends process. Just the honesty of admitting, because it's not something we just admit to ourselves. Ultimately, it's rare that we just like get sober and don't tell anybody. Nobody finds out. Oh, it's not just, I mean, it's a public thing, but it's also a very interpersonal thing in our families and our relationships. And and so it's already a kind of amends to just not be doing the damage that we were doing. And certainly it's an amends to ourselves, to take that, begin the process. So, uh, the some of the other things in this paragraph maybe are they're very, you know, uh, suggesting something that I don't know. Again, why I, put that question mark in, I don't know if it's true for everyone, but it's how I see it from this side, having gone through this process and having lived this process for so long, that something happens to us, a gradual but radical shift from shame, guilt, and denial to openness, acceptance, and honesty. So so I think this is, again, I'm not sure it happens to everybody, but I think for the steps, and for recovery to really blossom, this is what needs to happen. And this is very much about self-love and self-forgiveness and self-compassion. Is that this shift from shame, guilt. So shame and guilt are the first two, I think, that are so common for addicts. And and certainly, just looking at your inventory, it can trigger those things. Um, Looking at the list of people you'd harmed can trigger those things. So, but for us to fulfill this step in a way that's really transformative, we have to change. It's not just the outward action. In fact, the outward action is, I just think, that almost the least important part of this step. It's an important part, but I just don't think it's as nearly as important as the internal part of it, which is that transformation into to seeing, oh, that we forgive ourselves. And this is you know, uh, to me, this is implied in the Four Noble Truths as well. And this is where I would say Buddhism can help our view of the step, is understanding that, the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering and its cause, and how our so much of our pain and our suffering is caused by just these, conditioned and deeply conditioned and really human tendencies of craving, and that when we can let go, then freedom can come, and that there's a process for that. So, but what's the big picture of that is that it's not personal, and that we didn't sign up for this, we didn't ask for this, and we don't, uh, we're not. responsible for the fact that this is how life is. And so when we see that there's this suffering that we have this suffering and others have this suffering that's just caused, it's just the nature of life, of human life, of the human having a human mind, then the wise and skillful and sensible response to that is kindness and forgiveness and compassion. Why would we be cruel to someone, and or why would we personally feel shame and guilt for something that was just, it's like saying, oh, I was digesting food. I'm so embarrassed, or something, it's like, no, but it's just it's a natural process. So I'm not gonna, then it's not just digesting food, it's having a tummy ache, right? Ow, ow. Do you get angry with yourself or you get angry with your stomach? You stupid stomach. And you start beating up on your stomach because your stomach hurts. No, you're like, oh, how can I take care of you? I need to take care. Oh, I'm sorry you're hurting, Of course, we take it personally, but nonetheless, if we can see it in these impersonal terms, then there is this natural shift that happens, and again, that's what I think the steps are trying to get us to. And this is not an original idea. It's right there in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that self-centeredness was our problem, and so clearly the steps are trying to not just take us through a process of you know uh, healing and growth on an external way level and on a interpersonal level and on a you know around our addiction itself, but rather they're trying to take us to a place of not of letting go of self, of not self, of and what that means is of not identifying so much with our experience and our mind and our feelings that we take everything personally. That they're trying to help us to see our just humanness, and that's what, when it says in step 12 that we had a spiritual awakening, that's the fundamental spiritual awakening, right? That's core spiritual awakening of Buddhism, and I believe that in all religions, it's pointing towards this, letting go of our self-obsession, letting go of our self-concern on this, ego or egoic level, so that because shame and guilt particularly are very egocentric ideas. They're really about me. Oh, I'm so bad. So I'm worse than anybody else. I don't deserve love because I'm so especially bad. And when we put ourselves just in the stream of humanity, and particularly as addicts into the stream of addicts, if you go to enough meetings and listen to enough people's stories and, do your own inventory and then listen to other people's inventories, after a while, it's like it all blends together and you can't pick yourself out. Well, how do I stand out? What makes me separate and different from these people? Nothing. You know, oh, I can, sure, I got my story, my particular story, but the details are just details. And so a gradual shift from shame, guilt, and then third, denial, which is kind of different from shame and guilt, clearly. But as I say, then to openness, acceptance, and honesty. So again, there's just such a critical idea in recovery and the steps. No, I was talking for the Napa Valley Insight Group the other night about right speech and about honesty, and Bhikkhu Bodhi has a really interesting thing he says about honesty, which is talking about the transcendent purpose of honesty, saying that our the spiritual path to enlightenment is one of trying to see the absolute truth with a capital T. And if you lie, if you are dishonest, then you are taking yourself in the opposite direction of the truth. And so he says, like the bodhisattva, someone who's on the path to awakening, can't lie because it's just opposite from the way that they're going. As what's the line from Suzuki Roshi? The bodhisattva knows only one way, even if the sun were to arise in the west. He would continue, or she would continue, this one way, the way of truth. Hmm. So revealing ourselves to ourselves and others through the steps frees us from having to protect or hide parts of ourselves from the world. Right. I mean, this is one of the things that's so freeing. It's like we were with our shame and guilt, we were hiding ourselves, and in that there's this fear, right? Oh, what if people find out the truth? What if they find out who I am? What if they find out about my anger and my lust and my, my resentments and my fears? And then, the steps force us into this radical honesty in which we expose all that, and we don't get struck by lightning. We actually we feel, certainly I felt, and the people, many people I've seen, feel this lightening of the load. Oh, I don't have to hide this. I don't have to carry this. And again, it's that putting it out into just, oh, this is just human. It's not that special. You know? So then this final statement, once we discover the lightness of opening in this way, we can become almost playful about our failings. So I guess, I wrote that because I gotten to that point. I mean, I remember um, the point when I started to realize um, how writing inventory and making amends had really helped me, had really changed how I operated in the world. Was this the first like office job I ever had? I was um, almost 3 years sober, and it was for the Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District in their personnel office. And I started, like, when I would do something wrong or make a mistake, I would just like tell my boss. And it was like, it was such a unique, like different thing, right? Than my usual thing, which was like, oh shit, they're going to catch me. Oh no, I hope I don't get fired. I better not tell anybody. And instead, of course, when you're in a job, and you tell your boss that you made a mistake, their first reaction is, well, thank you for telling me, because if I didn't know that happened, I'd have this problem going on that I didn't know about. And then after that, they might spank you, but generally not, because there's laws. But it just was like, I remember doing that for the first time and thinking, wow, that was so much easier. That was so easy. Like, it's really okay. It's really okay to be imperfect. Ah, so, um, well, that's the opening. There's a little bit more. Do I have this other thing in here? Oh yeah. So yeah, I'm not sure how this exactly relates, but I will just look at this. The last paragraph in this opening section of step 9. Uh, Cleaning up our lives in this way is critical to the Buddhist path. And I'm talking about, like, not just making amends, but sort of getting your life in order. The first thing the Buddha taught people was generosity. But how are we going to be generous if our work and financial life are in disarray? In practical terms, how are we going to go and retreat if we can't afford to take a little time off work? Well, it's easy to say all that too, but I have to admit that these are the words of someone with some privilege. Um, because just because you're sober doesn't mean that you uh, have a type of job where you can take 10 days off for retreat. The Buddha said, noble friends and noble conversation were the whole of the holy life, but how are we going to have successful relationships if our histories are scarred and unresolved? In these very real ways, our practice requires a clean slate. Even more, we discover when we sit down to meditate the need to be free of excessive guilt and worries. Well, that kind of points to the teachings about sila and how if we aren't living skillfully, if we are living unethically, that when we try to meditate, we're going to wind up, with a lot of shame and guilt coming through. So that seems like enough words for before opening up to Olive is out there on the porch wanting to get in. So if you hear some barking, that is the neighbor. Well, the neighbor's dog, actually, not the neighbor. That would be odd if I had a neighbor who was barking. So just wondering if anybody has any comments or thoughts they'd like to contribute tonight, or questions or anything of the sort. Happy to hear some other voices. You can just unmute yourself, or if you want to be formal, you can raise your hand in the Zoom-like fashion.
I'm Rachel, alcoholic.
Hey, Rachel.
So you questioned yourself by circling, I don't know, joyful or
Playful, yeah.
Yeah. And I think after I had been, well, first of all, when I came into the program and I would see these people laughing about things,
right.
I couldn't believe they were. And now, after a few 24 hours, I do laugh and joke with people in the program about things that it would be absolutely impossible to joke and laugh with outsiders because they just wouldn't get it. So,
true.
That resonates for me. I cannot not take myself quite so seriously, even though recovery is definitely a serious and important thing.
Yeah.
I can joke about past behaviors with other people who did the same thing, and it's a bonding for us.
Yeah.
So, anyway, my take on that.
Yep. Thank you. I'm with you on that. And what a gift that is, right? I mean, we shall not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. Exactly, right? We don't have to live that way. We don't have to have that shame. What is the line about comedy is just tragedy with time? I think that was there's some kind of a line like that, right? Wow, quiet people. I guess there's just a lot of shame here. People are just too, or maybe you're all protecting your egos. You wouldn't want to be humiliated on Zoom. Somebody might hear you say something stupid. All right, that was mean of me. I'm sorry. I'm just self-conscious because I'm sitting here. Come on. All right, I can stare you down.
Kevin, I'll say something stupid.
Oh, Fordham, right on, dude.
Hey, I of course, super fan of yours, but not only just for being a rock and roller, but also being in recovery in Buddhism. But how, I know that there's, what is it, like every 14 days, the monastics, they do like a restitution, right? Like a amends, or on the full moon and the half moon. I don't know if you could speak to that, how that relates to our program.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure the timing. I thought it was once a month, but it could be on the new moon and the full moon. But so um, they recite the precepts together, and then if you've broken one of the precepts, you kind of make, I think, like a public confession. But there's also something you do with, I think, with your preceptor or with the abbot, where you kind of go to him. And so, yeah, it's from what I've been told, it a lot of it's kind of rote. It's not too, I don't think it has quite the sort of visceral impact of that we have with amends or with inventory. But I think that's the spirit of it. I mean, just like, when I was a Catholic child, we would go to confession. And again, that kind of lost. It didn't have a lot of, for, an 8-year-old, it was really hard to go in and tell somebody about all my sins. The very idea is kind of distasteful at this point. But I also do know and have had some, contact with monks who have broken more serious precepts. And they have to go through a whole, they kind of get like knocked down in their seniority, I think. Like they kind of can't, like, you can't become an Ajahn, I think, if you've broken some of the more serious precepts. And there's sort of a whole period of like restitution they have to go through and like rebuilding the trust within the community. And then, of course, there are precepts that if you break them, uh, you're disrobed. They kick you out if you have intercourse. Um, there might be some others. That's the number one, of course. But yeah, I mean, it
I wonder if if I was going to say a minor monk, a younger monk was ever advised by an older monk saying, "Hey, if you're having trouble with that fifth precept, why don't you go to AA or talk to somebody like Kevin Griffin? Maybe that'll help you, stay sober." And I really appreciated what you were saying. That's something that my sponsor said to me when I was whining about, you know, 8-step and really making that 8-step like there is no 9-step. But of course, the worst thing about doing your 8-step and then you got to do the 9-step. And he said, this is not about doing a step. It's about living like this. This is ultimately about, so you don't necessarily have to make amends. You're you're living in a way that you won't have to make those amends.
yeah,
Hey, let's try that. I was like, oh right,
yeah,
hey, that seems like headed off at the pass. But anyway,
yeah, yeah, and that, and that, that the 10th step, uh, uh, promptly, that we start to, that if we do something, that we promptly respond. Because I think there is something about, time. Another saying about justice. Justice delayed is justice deferred. And I think amends that are delayed is like amends that are deferred. It's like you don't, if you immediately say, "I'm really sorry," that's a lot better than waiting a few years and coming back. So getting used to just being honest about it. But back to the question about y- yeah, I mean, that's, yeah. I do know one monk who's going to a 12-step program right now. Um, and yeah, it's yeah, it happens. Um,
I just remember being struck by the first Monsignor or father, from a
yeah,
congregation
yeah,
who here's a guy that knows all the rituals and rites and everything, and it was like you're saying, this we're not perfect.
yeah,
It's a really big bit of humility to come in and admit you have a problem and then take some inventory and then make these amends. And I tell sponsees, like, when they're freaking out about doing a 4-step or an 8-step, I say, listen, there's a 10-step here. This program is built because it knows that we're human. We're gonna make mistakes.
yeah,
So, but the 9-step, 4-step and the 8-step, 9-step are the time when we're really like, we've been chucking all this garbage in the room, and now we got to go through it, and be like,
yeah,
I think the toughest amends that I've that I continue to do when my sponsor said, you got to leave that alone. I was like, oh, like you were saying, like, oh, but you told me never to talk to you, but I'm making amends. It's like, oh, can't even go, it's worse than having somebody dead and like going to their funeral and saying, I'm sorry. It's like, they don't want to talk to you. They don't want
Yeah.
to, and you have to live with that and be like, well, what do I do? And of course, a sponsor was like, well, you give to a charity or work for a charity that maybe is helping in a way that you would help that person by making
Yeah.
amends. Anyway.
Yeah, the claim that we shall not regret the past that's a
Mm,
big one. There are definitely moments when stuff comes back. I mean, that's
yeah.
what's been actually difficult for me going back to this book, because in this chapter I talk about my father and then I talk about my brother, and
Mm,
you know, I mean, there wasn't that much with my father, but I really screwed my brother, and we're very close today. But when I think about those days, it's just I regret it. I can't pretend that I don't regret that.
yeah.
But
And family's tough like that, right? That's actually the amends my sponsor was saying, leave it alone, was my sister. And because we're so close, and
yeah,
you're in such proximity, you're going to be human with these people.
yeah.
And it's very difficult. And
But the way that I frame it and what I really like about the promises is when it says that, we'll come to see how our experience can benefit others.
others, right?
And that's where when I think about all of that, if I remember to not get self-obsessed, I realize, oh, where am I? What's
Mm,
my life right now? And this is a result of everything that happened.
yeah.
So if I'm regretting something that happened, then I'm in a sense regretting where I am today.
Right. And I think that's where your use of the, surface level of reading it, playful, might be a little strong for somebody that's
Yeah.
not hip to,
Yeah.
hey, you have to be playful. This is how you get curious. This is how non-aggression and appreciate where we're at. Anyway, thank you, Kevin, man. It's always a wonderful to hear
Yeah.
you.
Always nice to see your phone on here. So,
I'm in a
Meg,
dark room, so it wouldn't matter
I
if
know.
I turned on the.
Megan et al., you have the virtual hand up. Hi.
Hey, Kevin. So I was wondering,
Jared, not
Oh,
me.
yeah, yeah. I remember him. Everybody's so
um,
small, but now I remember him. Yeah, hi.
I was wondering if you could speak to relapse for a second, because I keep making these amends and I'm having to remake them again or attempt to, because I keep falling short of making these promises in the long term and keeping them by relapse. So that's all I have.
So you're saying you're not just relapsing in terms of the behavior that you're making amends for, you're relapsing around your addiction?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
So for now, I would skip the amends and just focus on the relapse, because the best form of amends is the sobriety or the recovery, the uh, stopping the behavior. How that to me that's the biggest mystery in it. That is, how do we establish and maintain early recovery? And I don't have an answer for that. That's what I mean. That's what I got from AA, and which I didn't get it from Buddhism. Was I just started to go to meetings. I mean, it was about. It's interesting. They have the phrase "made a decision" in step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over. But to me, step 1 was really the decision. That was the big decision. I made a decision, but and it was more than a decision. It was a realization that this just doesn't work. So to me, that's the key idea that has to be completely taken in, completely believed, known. Just, I'm convinced that this doesn't work. As long as I think that it's sort of, I could still enjoy it, or like, well, maybe if I did this and I did that tweak, or, a little more of this and a little less of that, or counted this, whatever, as long as I have an out, I'm going to find it. So for me, it was just like, I felt like I had tried everything. I tried just doing it was like, okay, just marijuana, but no drinking, you know, or just drinking and no drugs, or, um, count, just limit how much I drink, or whatever. And, it would always fall back into the same patterns of doing too much. And, pot wasn't enough. I needed to drink. Drinking wasn't enough. I needed drugs. Counting the drinks, inevitably, it was like one night be like, screw it. And I'm drunk and I'm in a blackout, or I'm driving drunk. And so I became convinced, once I kind of put myself to the test, you know, my final test was kind of like, okay, I'm going to stop, or I'm going to control it. And then I had like what would have qualified as a relapse if I had actually been trying to not drink. But it just got worse and worse. And my life was getting, it wasn't just that, that the drinking and drugging didn't work. It was also that my life wasn't working. So, it just I just finally realized this. And so I made this decision, which was like, I'm not going to do this. What do I have to do in order to not do this? Okay, they say go to meetings. So I started going to meetings and reading the big book, and not drinking in between. You know, I don't have much more than that, just basic advice. I mean, what happens? What are the triggers? What are the things that set you off?
It so closely correlates with my depression, anxiety, and stress.
Yeah, yeah.
That it's kind of hard to kind of untangle the two and find out, you know, which one. I know that when the relapse happens, then it's really hard to come back from just spiraling out of control. Um, but it's kind of hard to kind of differentiate which is it coming from the depression, or is it coming from this episode of anguish and stress and all these things, like, and burning out, or is it coming as a result of from like just that I'm an addict? And so it's kind of hard
Yeah.
to figure
Well,
out.
well, so, getting sober did not take away stress in my life. Doesn't take away stress. It actually makes things more stressful at first. It, I've had, uh, extended episodes of depression in sobriety. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you have to separate them in some way. I mean, I think you also, yeah, I mean, how are you addressing the depression? You know?
Well, I've been taking antidepressants. Um, it's not, I've kind of feel like there's a stigma around that, and but it's been strongly suggested, from my psychologist, and um, been coming to these meetings, AA meetings,
Yeah.
um, and trying to just kind of uh, stay in my cocoon until I feel like I can be normal enough to function and kind of resume normal activities and work. So,
Well, I certainly don't think, I know there was a time maybe when there was a stigma about antidepressants in AA and NA, but I don't know if there's much of that anymore. I certainly don't see it. I've been on antidepressants. They helped. I didn't like them, but they helped. But Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, the cliches are kind of a big part of it, of taking it one day at a time, but and trying to, establish a new kind of set point, which in a new kind of life that just doesn't involve using or drinking. That it's like fine and so I don't know about being in a cocoon. I mean, we're all kind of in a cocoon, which sucks, but I think you have to find a new life. It's not enough to just like remove the substances from our lives. We need to find replacements for that. I mean, meetings are supposed to be part of that. Uh, but we have to find ways to find happiness, things that bring us, more than just like I'm not depressed, but actively engaged in our lives. And that's to me, that's recovery, is trying to much more than just not drinking and using. I see someone has mentioned, we have been creating uh, a contact list uh, for people if you want to talk to somebody, like, you know, sort of I don't know if we're going to call them sponsors, but we're kind of offering people who are experienced in recovery and experienced with Buddhism. Uh, do we have that, Angela? Do you have the link to that page? I can find it very quickly. Let me. Let's see. Or maybe I can't find it right. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So I think this is a public page, and it's got 8 or 9 people on it who, here we go. If will you can you okay, if will you click on that? Um, Tell me your name again.
Jared.
Jared, right? Yeah. And these are family members.
And this is the family.
Megan,
this is
Megan.
wife, and then my mom.
spouse and
Hi.
mother-in-law.
Hi.
I'm
Hi.
We're all
Thanks.
living together happily in our apartment.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they could like tie you down and just not let you
Yeah.
ever.
Well, there's the proximity to drugs here in the city that, just kind of hiding out and not trying to avoid, areas where people are aggressively trying to, um, you know, sell me drugs and
I would, number one, don't go to those places.
right. That's
Uh,
so I've been kind of just
That would be definitely one of my suggestions. I mean, that's definitely, we have to change our whole life. Someone is just, I don't know if this page is still active.
I see people are able, well, some
okay. Here we go. Yeah.
able to edit it.
Yes. Okay. So if anybody who's on the call, and obviously we've run way late, and which means my wife is waiting for me to watch Last Chance U. Awesome. But yes, the book Living Sober. Oh, interesting. That's a good one to mention.
Yeah, so just a note to make sure when you're editing to maybe skip down some lines, just so that if people
yes.
are editing that you don't.
And Vicky also pointed out that it's mostly been women who have signed up. So it'd be great if there were, if more men wanted to sign up to be helpful resources for relatively new people. All right. Well, we better go. But Jared, keep coming back and keep showing up. And Megan, just bang him over the head. Very lovingly. Just.
I do. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we've been coming to you for years now, but
Yeah.
we miss you up at Spirit Rock.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one day.
Yeah.
These have been so great.
We should be back there soon.
Yeah.
I hope. All right, folks. Thank you all for showing up, for taking care of yourselves and hanging out. I'll be back on Tuesday morning.